What happens if you're put in solitary confinement? There is one punishment inside American prisons that inmates fear more than violence itself. Not a beating, not a shank in the yard. A locked door, four walls, and silence. Solitary confinement. Most people think it just means being alone. They're wrong. What happens inside that cell can break a human mind in ways that violence never could. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why some inmates say they'd rather take a beating than spend one more day in the hole. Because what solitary does to the brain is something most people never hear about. And it starts faster than you'd think. The moment those doors close, the cell shrinks to roughly the size of a parking space. 6 feet by 9 feet. A bed. A steel toilet. Sometimes a small slit of a window. Sometimes none at all. No conversation. No human contact. No windows to the outside world. Just concrete, steel, and time. For the first few hours, most inmates say it feels almost like relief. No threats. No fights to survive. No one watching your back every second. Just quiet. But that quiet doesn't last. By day 2, the mind starts looking for stimulation that isn't there. Prisoners describe staring at the same crack in the wall for hours, counting cinder blocks, replaying old memories on a loop, over and over, because there's nothing else to think about. By day 4 or 5, something darker begins. Inmates report hearing sounds that aren't there. Whispers, footsteps. Some say they start talking to themselves just to hear a human voice, even if it's their own. But that's not even the craziest part. Studies on long-term isolation have found that the brain, when deprived of normal sensory input for extended periods, begins to malfunction in measurable ways. Time perception distorts. Some inmates lose track of whether it's day or night entirely, because artificial light stays on around the clock in many isolation units. Others report full hallucinations after just 2 weeks, seeing shapes move in the dark, hearing voices call their name. This isn't a rare reaction. Mental health researchers who've studied solitary confinement for decades have documented a consistent pattern of symptoms so common they gave it a name. SHU syndrome, named after the security housing units where it happens most. Panic attacks, paranoia, memory loss, uncontrollable rage. Some inmates start self-harming just to feel something real. And this is where things get dangerous. Because the human brain isn't built for total isolation. Not for days. Not for weeks. Some inmates in the most restrictive federal and state facilities have spent months, even years, in these conditions. And when they eventually get released back into general population, or back into society entirely, many of them are not the same person who walked in. Correctional officers who work these units have described watching men deteriorate in real time. Prisoners who once seemed sharp and alert slowly become withdrawn, mumbling, disconnected from reality. Some stop eating. Some stop speaking altogether for days at a time. But prison veterans know something most people don't. Solitary isn't just used as punishment for violence. In many facilities, it's used to control problem inmates, break gang loyalty, or protect informants from retaliation. It's also used to separate inmates who are considered a danger to others, meaning some of the most violent, unpredictable people in the entire prison system spend the most time in these cells. Isolation breeding more instability, which leads to more isolation. A cycle that almost never breaks. Then everything changed. Over the last 2 decades, that cycle started drawing national attention. Lawsuits, congressional hearings, investigative reports revealing that juveniles and even inmates with documented mental illness were being placed in solitary for infractions as minor as talking back to a guard. Some spent months in isolation before ever seeing a judge. Some never fully recovered. One of the most chilling revelations to come out of these investigations wasn't about violence at all. It was about silence. Former solitary inmates, years after release, describing the same haunting detail. They still can't sleep with the door closed. Some can't stand small rooms. Some flinch at silence itself, because silence is what broke them. Because here's the truth almost nobody talks about. The goal of solitary was never really about the 4 walls. It's about what those 4 walls do to a mind that has nowhere left to go. No distraction. No escape. No one to talk to but the version of yourself you're desperately trying to hold together. And that's the most terrifying part of this entire punishment. It's not the food slot in the door. It's not the 23 hours locked inside. It's the moment your own mind becomes the enemy you can't get away from. Some inmates describe a specific breaking point, usually somewhere between the second and third week, where the isolation stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like erasure. Like the outside world is fading, and the only thing left that's real is the cell. Mental health experts who've reviewed decades of data on long-term isolation have reached a disturbing consensus. The psychological damage caused by extended solitary confinement can be comparable to physical torture. Some describe it as one of the most severe forms of psychological harm the human mind can experience, worse, in many documented cases, than physical violence itself. And that raises a question most people never think to ask. If solitary confinement is meant to control dangerous behavior, what happens when it makes people more dangerous, not less? What happens when someone spends years in near total isolation, and then one day, that door opens for good, and they're released straight back into society, carrying every scar that silence left behind? Some reform advocates argue this is exactly why recidivism stays so high among former solitary inmates. Others argue certain prisoners are simply too dangerous to house any other way. The debate has no easy answer, and the men and women who've actually lived through it rarely get asked what they think at all. Would you survive even 1 week inside a place like this? No conversation, no sunlight, no sound but your own breathing and the hum of a fluorescent light that never turns off. Do you think solitary confinement makes prisons safer, or does it just create a different kind of danger, one that walks free eventually, carrying wounds no one can see? If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more real prison stories and hidden truths from behind bars.